Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's the Apple Professional here, and today I will be talking about the iPad 5th generation, and we will be seeing if it is still worth it in 2020. This is the 2017 iPad 9.7-inch iPad, and it holds up okay in 2020. If you aren't familiar with these iPads, this iPad was a budget-friendly iPad when it first came out, and it belongs to the budget lineup of iPads. These types of iPads are kind of like the iPhone 11s and the iPhone XRs. These iPads are basically just like those iPhones, but in iPad format for the iPad lineup. One thing I should tell you though is that these iPads is like, if you can afford the latest and greatest iPad Pro, then you are better off picking that iPad up because it's a great value and it's the best iPad you can buy right now. But if you're looking for a basic iPad that you can buy and you want to save a lot of cash, this is the iPad to go for. So let's talk about the display. The iPad 5th generation has a 9.7-inch Retina panel with a regular IPS screen, which is kind of cool, I guess, for a budget iPad. Okay, so the resolution is 2048 by 1536. That's a good-looking panel for the most part. However, there is a tiny gap between the glass and the screen, and I don't know about you, but this is like one of my pet peeves about this iPad. For most average users, this isn't that much of a deal, but yeah. But other than that, I still think this panel looks great. To this day, it's a great panel for anything you're going to do with it, whether it's content consumption or whatever. You have a little bezel around the display, but it's not big of a deal. I can live with it. At least this iPad isn't like the iPad 4th generation, which has pretty fat and disturbing bezels all around the display. Anyways, on the front we have the Touch ID sensor, and it's not crazy fast, but the first generation Touch ID does the job. I would prefer the second generation since it's much better, faster, and more secure, but these ones are okay as well. The whole bezels and Touch ID might look a little ancient to this day, but we also have the iPad mini 5th generation and the 2019 iPad Air, which have the same front design and are still being sold brand new by Apple. Also, I don't think this iPad design will stop being implemented in some Apple products because we got the 2020 iPhone SE with a similar design a few months ago, and there are rumors for another iPhone SE model to release next year with this similar design. On the bottom, we have the Lightning port with the headphone jack. We also have two speakers as well. On the back, we have that single measly 8-megapixel camera and a single front-facing 1.2 megapixel camera on the front. The back camera is the same camera as the iPhone 6, but with less quality video and other detached capabilities, but I feel it's very good for a majority of people. There could be some times where your FaceTime calls are glitchy, or they cannot look as good, but it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, this iPad actually still feels very good and very solid to this day. It doesn't feel like one of those cheap Android tablets you can get around the same price. What I can tell you though is that some people may not like the design, especially when you compare it to the iPad Pro 3rd Gen and 4th Gen. Some people like that thin bezel full screen design. But I think you can have a mix of this with the 2017 iPad Pro 10.5-inch for about a starting price of $400 to $430 on Swappa. I think it lowered to $365 too, like right now. This iPad is a really good device, and I actually like these versions of the iPad Pro a lot. If you have a bit more cash, you should definitely go for this iPad. It is a no-compromise iPad, meaning it will have most of the features of all the iPads in Apple's current 2020 lineup, and that's why I like it so much. It has a 12 megapixel camera, more storage and color options, a bigger display, Apple Pencil support, and Apple Keyboard support, and 4 speakers. It's all around a good iPad, and I would recommend a lot of people to look at that iPad. With this iPad, you can maintain a slimmer profile while still getting a cheap iPad. I will leave the link to get the iPad also down in the description below, so you should go check it out. Also, okay, so let's get back to the iPad 5th generation. So that really covers it up on the outside. So for the main exterior of the device, there's no IP certification for this iPad, or for any iPad really, but it would be really cool if iPads did have that capability. Another thing to note down is that this iPad does not support the Apple Pencil for you artists out there. Probably want to look at something like the iPad 6th generation or the 2017 iPad Pro 10.5-inch I mentioned earlier. Now let's talk about the software of this device. I believe this iPad was released on iOS 10.2 or iOS 10.3. So basically the ending of iOS 10. I believe that iOS 10 was one of Apple's medium-sized updates with a ton of cool features, so I guess that's cool. However, this iPad does support iPadOS, which is really cool. That means you can hook up a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse and get some actual work done. And the mouse function on iPadOS is actually really good. And this iPad will support iPadOS 14 and maybe iPadOS 15, but I doubt it. iPadOS has been a very welcoming change to the iPad lineup. I really like it a lot, and it looks clean for the most part, and it adds a lot of functionality to the iPad. This new software took iPads from being average and mainly for content consumption to being productive and closer to a real laptop replacement. It is its own separate OS, and it does a pretty good job handling itself, even though it's very, very familiar to iOS in so many ways. It is a really awesome thing that it can support iPadOS, but due to the A9 processor inside of this thing, I doubt it can even last you longer than June of 2021. Or maybe even September. Sometimes iPad lasts longer because Apple supports them for longer, and Apple does have a history of supporting their devices for a longer time. This iPad has the same chipset as the iPhone 6s that came out in 2015. This may be just a theory, but we have seen a lot of iPads that have the same chipset as the iPhones, or a variant of the chipset. Those iPads end up getting more software support than those iPhones. For example, you can take the iPad mini 4, which has the same chipset as the iPhone 6, but it got one more full version of software updates than the iPhone 6. I think that's pretty cool, and because of the iPad 5th generation has a chance of getting iPadOS 15, but we'll have to wait and see. We really don't know. In terms of software, that's pretty much it. Now moving on to the performance of this iPad. This iPad has the Apple A9 chip with a double-core CPU with 2 GB of RAM. There were two different models of this iPad, a 32 GB and a 128 GB version. The iPad I have here is the 128 GB version. What I can tell you about the performances of the iPad is that it's not a bad performing iPad, and it isn't slow either, but if you try playing something graphically intensive games such as Fortnite, you will see some lag here and there. I think it actually might be a little faster than the iPhone 6s, which is kind of funny, and the reason I think so is because it's newer than the iPhone 6s. It came out in 2017. I feel like it's also smoother at the end of the day, but maybe my eyes are just tricking me. Whatever I did with this iPad, like basic things such as content consumption or picture mode, this iPad handles those things perfectly with no doubt. This iPad is a pretty recent iPad, so performance should be good on this iPad. I can see that Apple targeted this iPad for students overall because their whole ads were like, do anything with this device, and because their whole ads were like, do anything with this device, and this iPad is fun. They also capitalized on education with this device, on how they'll make it cheaper for schools and stuff. I actually used this for my schoolwork for 3 years, and I did everything pretty well. I didn't have really any hiccups. Notability was great to take notes, and on other education apps ran perfectly okay. If you're going to college and you don't want to buy a MacBook or a laptop, this might serve as a decent replacement, but if you are a student looking for an iPad for college and stuff, I would recommend you to get the 2017 iPad Pro or the iPad 7th generation, because those iPads are great value iPads with big screens to take good notes on. I think that the iPad is a very good replacement for a laptop, and I truly believe in that. I think there are still more changes and tweaks Apple needs to make to iPadOS to make it more like macOS or Windows, such as maybe the app layout or how the iPadOS handles files. I think students will use an iPad to write papers or documents, and it'll handle all that good stuff, and the iPad will handle all of those tasks just fine. I just repeated myself, sorry. The only thing that won't run well on this iPad is intensive gaming, which is what I mentioned before. If you're looking for a budget iPad that can game, you should either pick up the 2019 iPad Air or the 2019 iPad Mini 5 or the 2017 iPad Pro. Those iPads are great for intensive gaming. So definitely in performance, I think the iPad 5th generation is perfectly okay for a majority of people out there. Lastly, let's talk about the battery life. This iPad has an 8,827 mAh battery, which is a very good battery size for this specific device. The screen resolution isn't that crazy, and plus it's LCD, so the battery won't need much power for the display, and therefore you will get pretty long battery life. you should be able to get multiple days of use out of this. Just a note, if you're picking up a used or refurbished iPad, you want to look at the battery capacity, because if it's below 80%, you may want your battery to be replaced by Apple, so you have the most battery life, and you can get, but I wouldn't worry about it. The standby time on this iPad is very good also. So to recap this video, and to answer the question, should you still pick up the iPad 5th generation in 2020? Well, I would tell you you should pick up this iPad without a doubt. This iPad is a $175 to $200. This iPad is a $175 to $200 device, and for that price, you're getting a really good tablet, so it's an awesome value. But like I said before, if you have a bit more cash to burn, you should get the 2017 iPad Pro 10.5-inch, because it has more value than the iPad 5th generation. So that's it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please comment down below, and I will definitely get back to you. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and the subscribe button, because every subscriber does count. I will see all of you in the next video. Peace out till then!